the aim and the message and the goal of the story is to be able to talk through. There are a lot of things that we don't get to understand. And there are going to be times you might sit in questions, especially related to loss. And those questions are hard and heavy. And then what do you do from that? So it doesn't necessarily get resolved. He goes into the dark forest and the bubbles pop and you see that he disappears, or what you know of him disappears. But those bubbles, then you start to recognize the bubbles, the light from those bubbles on the other pages, they're just dispersed. So we wanted that to be a way to kind of talk about sitting in those hard moments of loss. And then what next? How can you look and see the impact and see that those important pieces are still with you and around you, and you can learn to identify them and move forward, and you get to carry a little bit of that light with you.
That is Haylee Blauert, and this is the Well Mind Podcast. Welcome to a very special episode of the podcast. In addition to the typical audio format, there's also a video format available on YouTube. Listeners may enjoy checking out the video version because we've included some visual images to accompany our discussion. You can find a link to the video version in the show notes. My guests today are Haylee Blauert and Jason Jaspersen. Haylee is the author of a new children's book entitled Stars in the Sky, and Jason Jaspersen is the illustrator. Both of them joined me in the studio to talk about the upcoming book, the journey they both walked over the past 3 years to bring this story to the world, and the life and character of the man the book memorializes. This is not your typical children's book, but a work of literature and art. The book speaks to the importance of community and connection and faces the issues of mental health and grief and loss in a way that can help children and adults reflect on their own experiences. This is an important book, and I hope that the next hour is as impactful for you as it was for me. Here is my conversation with Haylee and Jason on Stars in the Sky. I have with me in the studio today Haylee Blauert and Jason Jaspersen. Thank you guys so much for being here and coming on the Well Mind Podcast. This is exciting for me that we get to do not just an audio format, but a video format as well. So I think the topics that we're going to be talking about and some of the imagery that we're going to be looking at together just lends itself to being able to have some video to go along with this. So thank you so much for both of you being willing and able to come on to the podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, awesome. So at the beginning of the show, it's always just good, I think, to help you guys introduce yourself to the Well Mind community. And really, it's just a little bit about kind of your background and where you're at right now. And then we can dive into the project that you guys have been working on for the past few years with the book. But I think just, getting started, Jason, I don't know if you'd be willing to kind of take that first stab and just kind of fill us in about who you are and where you're at now.
Okay. I'm a professor of studio art at Bethany Lutheran College. I also do commissioned artwork, and I have done on the side freelance commissioned artwork for 20 some years. And I'm here because I illustrated this book with Haylee, and because we have a mutual connection to the story.
Yeah, and we're definitely going to get into that for sure. So has been doing producing art, is that something that has just been always present for you, Jason, or is this something that you've kind of grown into?
Well, that's a nature versus nurture question, and I'm very interested in that. I could talk for a couple hours on that question, but I think I grew up in a creative household. My parents are sort of why not makers. They just feel like you can make things. And I was surrounded by a lot of people who just worked with their hands, had kind of novel ideas.
Yeah.
So
this is something that you grew up just seeing in the people around you.
Yeah.
And some of that just carried over into your own development too.
I think so.
Yeah.
And then, some key moments sort of sparked a flame that really made me chase being an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And I've put in countless hours.
Yeah.
To develop different skills.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that when you say different skills, because, today we're looking at illustrations for a book, but I think there's lots of other mediums that you like to work in. What are some of the different artistic formats that you use?
Well, I love oil painting. I do landscape or portrait oil painting. What we're doing in the book here is a traditional Japanese sumi ink painting, which I learned from my grandmother. I do monumental bronze and cement sculpture.
Mm-hmm.
I do some light animation, sand animation, and a lot of other miscellaneous media.
Mm-hmm.
I get distracted easily.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Tell me again what the name of the artistic format used in the book. What is that?
Sumi-e. Sumi-e. Sumi means black.
Okay.
A is image.
Okay.
So really, the production of these was just with black ink on paper, a very absorbent paper.
Okay.
And then I scanned and added color on the computer.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And you said this is something you learned from your grandmother.
Yes.
Yeah. There sounds like there could be a story there.
There is. She's Japanese. She's a painter, and so we had some really good mentoring moments when I was in high school.
Wow, pretty cool.
Yeah,
pretty cool. So this probably feels like there's a little bit of a connection to her when you're producing something like this.
Definitely. Yeah. She's in the back of my head when I'm moving that brush.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome. So we'll talk a little bit more as we get into it, kind of why this medium and this style for the book and those kind of things. But I want to hear a little bit from Haylee too. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. So I'm currently a kindergarten teacher in North Carolina, born and raised in Minnesota though, and have my undergraduate degree in elementary education and early childhood education, and then went to grad school at the University of Minnesota, Mankato for experiential education, and that's where I met Jason.
Okay.
So, and the real life Robert, who we'll meet in a minute here.
Yeah.
But so kind of early childhood, that's where my passion area lies. Professionally is studying development, attachment, community connection in those early years, and how do we develop that positively and give kind of the best start to life possible with those little ones. So it's kind of where my passion lies, and I've been teaching between kindergarten and preschool for the past 7 years.
Okay. And you said all of that's in North Carolina?
I've been there for 3 years. I started my teaching journey here in Minnesota and then moved out there for a chance to teach at an experiential education-based school.
Okay.
So
Tell me about that.
Well, it's a charter school and it's new. And when we did the program, when we were in the program together, often, so the thing about experiential education is it can be applied in so many different situations. That's just the nature of it. It's a methodology, a philosophy. So you can have a diverse range of backgrounds coming in, seeking that education and applying it in their fields. However, there weren't too many that were doing it in elementary or within a charter school or a public school branch. So when this school opened up in Greensboro, it felt like an opportunity to see how it could be applied in a public school new setting. Yeah. So it was kind of a leap of faith just to pack up, move out there and see what it would look like. in a public school setting. So
And how's it going?
it's been an adventure.
I bet. Yeah.
Starting a school from the ground up is always an adventure, I think. But it's exciting to see what it can look like and how it can be applied in those early years. So it has been exciting. And we started this idea before I even moved out there. So it's been in the works for a while. And children's literature is an area I've always loved. I love reading with the children. I love just spending that time and digging in with children's literature and pulling out conversation points and teaching around it.
Yeah.
That's personally what I love to do in the classroom and outside the classroom. So getting a chance to move to the other side of it and create a book and enter the arena of children's literature as an author is just, it's a very exciting adventure. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. No, that's so fascinating. Because, as you think about, like for me as a mental health counselor, I've spent a lot of time working with children throughout my career. Some very young, ages 4, 5, and 6. And, talk therapy is not a thing with really young kids. And so I engage kids with a lot of playful methods. And oftentimes we're doing a lot of storytelling while we're working together too. Storytelling through their play, storytelling through their creative art, whether that's in a sand tray or with Play-Doh or, just colors on a piece of paper, all different ways. But it's always amazing to me to see how much kids are able to express through these different mediums that have nothing to do with the words that they're saying.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
And so having a story like this in the dealing with some of the themes that we're going to talk about in terms of community and relationships and connections and grief and loss, mental health, these kind of big topics that would be really challenging to just talk about with kids. I think this is a format that families, kids, parents may be able to, I guess, navigate some of that a little bit better than if they were to just sit down and like, hey, let's talk about, what you're passionate about. Well, that's a hard conversation for kids to be able to have. So kind of going on the other side of this then as an author, I'm curious, like when you sat down to write this, did you have an end goal in mind or just what was that starting that process like?
Great question. No, I did not have an end goal with this. Actually, selfishly, it was more for me as a reflection point in how to get my thoughts on the loss of the real Robert, the real Rob, to get my thoughts out on how to reconcile that and how to think about that and kind of what next. Yeah. Where do you go from here? Yeah. So it kind of came more as a reflection. And even sitting down to write that was not planned at all. I feel like the words were kind of placed in my hands and in my heart to kind of write this. And was actually driving to a friend's house for dinner and let them know, I am here, I am on time, but I'm not coming in until I get this all out, and just sat in the parking lot and wrote it. So it was not planned in any way, shape, or form. But after I started to write it and kind of read it, I shared it with another friend from the program, from our experiential education program. And it was helpful and healing for her. And I kind of started to roll with it. And part of the way I was writing it when I was reflecting is, how would I share his story and share kind of the brilliance of his light? And how do I continue to carry that in a positive way? And then again, the healing piece, how do I reconcile the loss? So it was kind of that mindset that I had and carried when I wrote it. So kind of a beautiful, event or not anticipating anything coming from it.
Yeah.
And
you weren't producing something
no.
for someone else. This is something that kind of emerged out of your own just thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And I feel like I tend to trust things that I'm not piloting, and that I feel that it was put in my hands for a reason. And that is what has helped me move forward with it. Especially when the fear comes up of, this is too big. I don't know what I'm doing. I've never done this before. And how am I going to do it to really be meaningful and honoring? There's a lot of emotion tied up in this story. And so to move forward with it cautiously, but with a sense of carrying out with purpose, I guess. So, and
this is this is an experience that's near to you. You're not writing kind of about something, but you're expressing something through this. Yeah. So then when, Jason, did you get kind of involved in this process or project of then producing something?
When I knocked on your studio door.
Yeah. I mean, Haylee came over and we talked about this. She sort of presented the story, and it started kind of a slow development. My process has a lot to do with not knowing too. And so when I kind of took in her story, I let it sit for a while and then came back to it. And I produced some very rough thumbnail sketches that I would email out to Haylee and just let her know, first of all, that I'm paying attention to it, that it is on my mind, but also to get a little feedback on how do these scribbles look. So we did the whole book in sort of a scribble format, little tiny sketches. And then I bound a dummy book for the next round of iterations. And I put those little thumbnails in the corner and then did a bigger version, trying to refine based on Haylee's feedback and kind of my incubation on it. And I think through the course of it, I probably drew these pages 4 times each. Not really your question, but we linked down the road to process.
Absolutely, yeah. So this obviously is an experience that is close for you as well, because this is, as we were chatting before we hit the record button, this isn't a biography, but it is a reflection of someone's character and their experiences. So I don't know. I mean, if I could just ask you guys to talk a little bit about that in terms of like how the book is connected to something, real, a real story, but really is its own story as well.
Yes. So as I mentioned, we met in grad school in the experiential education program. And what I'll say about that program too is the community that came out of that is probably the most impactful experience I've had in a while. And that community was strong. It was unique and it was beautiful. People from all over the U.S. and outside of the U.S. And it was an in-person class, a small cohort. And we really spent a lot of time with each other, and just I felt like so many people in that program were deep thinkers and creatives, and you tend to go deep and make these lasting connections, and just an inspiring group of people.
And really broad backgrounds.
Yes.
Yeah. Like professional kayak paddler and elementary education and an artist, and people knew how to. I met a guy who knew how to rescue people from a school bus, how to cut apart a school bus to rescue people. Just really fascinating interactions happening in this cohort.
Yes. I would agree with
a
that.
lot of diversity, but still there for a kind of a unified purpose within the program.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They want to be able to actually get through to people with education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To really connect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that is where we met the real Rob. And so in the book, up there he is on the cover. That is in the book. He is Sir Robert III. And we didn't change his name, but he is based off of the real Rob. And we met him in the program, and he was, just like we were saying, authentic, creative, unique. He worked in different outdoor education settings. So you see that come across a little bit in the story. Now, in the story, channeled more of Galileo. And so he studies the stars in the stories and teaches others about the stars. But it still draws in the experiences of going on expeditions, which is something the real Rob did. And he would go on his own, and he would lead others out in the field.
Okay.
And I think he just brought a great perspective to things, and just very authentic.
Yeah, I saw him really leaning into people.
Yes.
Really trying to understand them.
Yeah. You felt known in his presence. So I think that was something unique about him, that you could just be meeting him for the first time, but you felt like you were known and you felt a connection. And I think that's also evidenced. He is from New Jersey, but did his undergrad program in Kentucky and then ended up here for grad school in Minnesota. And the pockets of people in the communities, especially after he passed away unexpectedly, to see these communities come together and to hear people's stories about him and the impact that he had in their lives from all over, I think that speaks volumes too on his impact and the light and the connection that he brought to other people and his communities.
Which seems to be a very central theme to the book itself. The character of Sir Robert is closely connected with his community, and there's a lot of joy and happiness that happens through those connections when he's there and present with them, whether that's just enjoying company or going on a journey, looking at the stars, learning those kind of things. But then there was a lot of solo time in the story for Sir Robert as well, and that seems again to be kind of a reflection of the Rob that you guys know through your program. Yeah,
I think that's accurate. And as you said, this book is not a biography, but trying to capture those character traits. And I think he was a deep thinker and very aware, and spent a lot of time reflecting on things and questioning. And that's a piece in the story as well. And the value of exploring nature, exploring the world around you, and seeking understanding and asking questions and questioning for him for faith too, and exploring those pieces as well. And what does that look like? His faith in science and studying psychology and the brain, asking a lot of big and deep questions and having profound conversations with others. So I think there was a balance, from what I could gather, of thinking inwardly and having those moments of solitude to reflect, but also knowing the importance of community. And he had written a piece on that too after he finished the AT Trail, and writing the need and the appreciation for the community he met along the way that he didn't have. I mean, a new community, new people he met, and the importance of meeting and counting on other people along the way. So,
and that's another kind of pocket of people, like these long trail hikers, through hikers, that is its own kind of distinct and separate community, and something that people form bonds and connections out on the trail that extend far beyond the time that they share walking together.
Absolutely. I think he felt that.
So can I ask a illustration question here? I'm wondering, because you were talking about the black ink being such a big, that's the primary format here, right? That all of this, there's on the different images and through the different pages, there seems to be a really stark contrast between the moments when, like, I don't remember exactly what page it is, but he's back in the community. There's like a big party, something about enjoying cheese. I don't know. I was kind of going to ask about that, but it's a very bright, like there's very little darkness in that image. But then to contrast that, there are other pages, especially ones as they start talking about the dark forest, where it's exceptionally dark. Like it's almost like at times difficult to make out what some of the specific images even are, because it's just so dark.
This is a great question.
Yeah. So I'm
preparing to answer.
Yeah. So this contrast, I guess it's a two-part question. One is I just want to hear your kind of thought process behind that and what you're trying to communicate. But then the second question is just from a communication standpoint, what are you trying to convey to the audience as they're looking at these images? So I know I don't like asking multiple questions on top of each other, but I did this time.
I can manage it. So, most of the pages have this kind of format where there's a sort of a ragged edge outline. You get the sense that it's an old book. And, so in this case, there's this image that's sort of bleeding at the edge, but there's a context. These sort of ragged pages is a context that reminds you that this is a story, this is a book. And page after page, that's present. So it becomes this world. The book becomes this world. But what you astutely noticed is that there are moments when that world gets broken out of. So
that's one of the images.
There are pages where that doesn't exist and the blackness just goes to the edge. Or this one. And both of these refer to the dark forest, which as an illustrator, I struggled with. I had a lot of iterations on how to illustrate this as a geographic place. What would it look like if I took a camera to the dark forest? But with time, I realized that that's not the point. This isn't about walking around a region. It's more internal. So I'm using the format. I'm sort of setting up this world that you get used to, page after page after page, so I can break it. So that it feels very abrupt. I want it to feel abrupt. I want it to feel different. A little frightening. And that is part of relaying the internal communication that we're trying to get at. So it's like the book's body language, sort of. I remember learning about the book Where the Wild Things Are. There's something that happens in that book that I didn't realize until someone showed me. Page after page, the area that the illustration takes up grows. So it starts framed inside of sort of white space, and it's this story that you read and you see the pictures, and you don't notice it. It's sort of like boiling a frog. Little by little, that space is growing until it's all the way to the edge of the book. And what's happening in the story correlates. Our character is getting more and more immersed in his imagination, traveling away from home to this place that's other. And then when he comes home, it sort of shrinks back. So this is a little bit of an homage to that idea that the format can say something.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. It was to be able to understand that now is really, really helpful for me, but it was very, like you said, noticeable to me as well. Reading it probably 4 or 5 times just in the last 24 hours. There were things that I noticed as I read it the 4th or 5th time that I certainly didn't catch the 1st or 2nd time.
That's really good to hear.
Yes.
As an artist, and I think with this project, I always want there to be a reward for looking closer. And, sometimes you sacrifice that initial sort of flashy appeal in order to be able to get that depth. But, Haylee just described something that I didn't realize about the story. And that you're saying that you see new things when you look at it again. All of that, I think, is exactly what we want to do.
Yeah.
We want to hit this ambiguity that is just so.
Yeah.
So that we say something about our friend Rob, and we say something to the reader, and sometimes they're not words that we're saying. We're communicating something that needs to be discovered.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about the dark forest, because as you were describing, this idea of a geographic place, but that it isn't a geographic place, it's something more internal. Haylee, can you kind of describe this, why the dark forest and kind of what that's all about?
Sure. Well, every story needs a villain. So I guess you could say the dark forest is the villain in this story. And as you said, and I like how you worded that, not necessarily a region. And I too had had a hard time picturing what it would actually look like. I couldn't quite get there either. It was almost a state of mind or a place. And I think the representation of that is having it in the story where that it's heavy, it's dark, it's not a place you necessarily want to go or be in, but that it's there. Yeah. And I think we wanted to keep it a little bit vague too, so it is relatable to the reader, so they can sit in their current situations or their own stories and relate it back to this story. So keeping it a little bit vague intentionally, for that purpose. And it can be a lot of things, and it can be mental health. It can be just death or loss. Those were kind of the feelings I had in mind when writing it. Yeah. And the characters in the story, they know of the dark forest, and I think just in real life, of those places, those hard situations, those hard moments, or what loss can feel like. It can feel like a separation. It is, in a sense. Yeah. So in the story, the characters know of the dark forest. They know it holds a presence and a place in their world, in their kingdom, but they know to avoid it. So it has a presence. It has that villainous presence. And then how to portray that was hard. And I like how Jason ended up using thorns. The idea, we knew it was going to be tangled, messy. It would try to hold you in it, whatever this place was, whatever this dark force feeling, this place. It wouldn't be pretty, and it wouldn't be neat and orderly. It's going to be messy and tangled. And I think the thorns helps for another reason, which we haven't really pointed out yet, which I'm going to, if that's okay. Jason has brilliantly put bubbles around the main character, so Robert, on every page. So that's again another thing. If you look closely, there are bubbles, and that's that splash of light too on each page that kind of contrasts the darker setting. And that's, again, very intentional. But those lights that are the bubbles, that's how we decided to portray the light, that we want people to kind of grapple with and understand that Sir Robert, about his character, that deeper sense that draws people to him, and that joy. So we portrayed it through bubbles.
Yeah.
So that's the splash of light on every page, except for, when we're introing the dark forest, when it's not there. So that comes into play later with the thorns and the bubbles.
And I, again, for me as a mental health counselor, like, to hear the dark forest being kind of a representation of mental health issues, whether that be, depression or something along those lines, that there's a darkness to it, but there's still the thorns. Obviously, once you're kind of in it, it's really hard to get out of that. But there's also a sense of like, it's almost like kind of beckoning or like drawing Sir Rob into this, and maybe even other people in the community. Like, there's this sense of like, I know that's not where I want to be, but there's this kind of sense of it drawing me in. And like, there are so many folks that I visited with over the years that have that experience of mental health, whatever it is. It's like, I see it, I know I don't want to go there, but yet I find myself back in it, like time and time again, even in spite of some really strong efforts to stay out of it. But it's still something that it doesn't go away. It's a presence. And that's, I think, helpful in having it as a geographic location, because it's there. It's not going anywhere. It's taking up space. It's occupying space. But it's how close am I to it? Am I getting drawn into it? Am I stuck in it? Am I just able to see it, from a distance and say, yep, maybe in my health and wellness, as I'm connected with other people, I can still see it, even in those really, really good times. So I just, that was something that really stood out to me about the presence of the dark forest as kind of a constant throughout the book. Like, it gets introduced right away, but then it's there at the end as well.
Yeah, and that was one of the challenges of the story too. How do you navigate darkness and light in our world? And that is something, like you said, I think it's both of those pieces are present in the world we live in this time that we are in. And it's there, but what words do you listen to? And it's hard. And I think in this story, the dark forest whispers those words, and only Sir Robert can hear them. And that's kind of also a piece of it, I feel like, from not having any experience in the mental health field. But thinking about, you don't always get to see the inward journey and hear, you don't always know the words that other people are hearing, and those things that become maybe truth over just background noise, those words that can sink in and hit hard and become a truth to an individual, even if they start out as those whispers that are kind of there. So I think that was part of what we wanted to draw on with the dark forest. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, we all have our internal dialogue about that's kind of running all the time anyway. And so without intentional focus on that, sometimes some truths, quote unquote, settle in there that aren't really based in truth. But unaddressed, they kind of set up camp and live there. So, this idea that Sir Rob he's this kind of gregarious, outgoing, positive person that's inspiring others, that draws people in, but then also he has this internal world that is, struggling with darkness, struggling with, maybe that internal dialogue, but that ends up kind of consuming him in the end of the book. And so I guess I want to hear you guys kind of talk a little bit about how you navigated that, both from a textual standpoint, but also from a visual standpoint of this abrupt end to Sir Robert?
I think that's a keyword right there with abrupt. And that is how it felt in real life. It was, we think about it, it's sometimes those sunny, happy, calm Tuesday mornings that will find you meeting an abrupt situation, or where grief finds you, sneaks in and just hits you. And this was hard. I mean, we had in mind, and we knew it was going to be a children's book. And that in itself has been a challenge of how do you approach the topic of grief and loss and death with children and keep it in a place where they'll be engaged and they'll like the story, but also be able to draw on it and have those real life conversations and still have an impact. So the main character in the story, he disappears. He doesn't return at the end of the story. And that was hard to figure out how to approach at a children's level.
Right.
However, I think the whole time we both knew it had to be abrupt. So we wanted to kind of build some suspense. He goes out on a journey. He has those fun and lively moments with his community ahead of time. They present him with a helmet because they know they can't go with him on this next journey. It's a solo journey. But they trust his steps. He's great at navigating. They expect him to return. And then he doesn't. And those bubbles pop and disappear on the pages. And that's one of my favorite things with the illustrations too. I mean, it's very hard to figure out how do we remove him? How do we build that he's just going to be gone?
Yeah.
And still keep it, again, universal. So we don't resolve that in the story, what happens to him, because that's part of the aim and the message and the goal of the story is to be able to talk through. There are a lot of things that we don't get to understand. And there are going to be times you might sit in questions, especially related to loss. And those questions are hard and heavy. And then what do you do from that? So it doesn't necessarily get resolved. He goes into the dark forest and the bubbles pop and you see that he disappears, or what you know of him disappears. But those bubbles, then you start to recognize the bubbles, the light from those bubbles on the other pages, they're just dispersed. So we wanted that to be a way to kind of talk about sitting in those hard moments of loss. And then what next? How can you look and see the impact and see that those important pieces are still with you and around you, and you can learn to identify them and move forward. And you get to carry a little bit of that light with you as you carry on. So that is probably not what you asked.
No, that is. Yeah. Jason, what do you want to add to that? What can you layer on it?
Well, the book exists because of trauma. It's a reaction to that, and it's an attempt to mentor others through it. So as I talked about the setting up the pages and then breaking that, we sort of set up a persona that just vanishes. And, hopefully that's a safe parallel to something that might happen to somebody. And we might be preparing somebody or helping somebody to reflect on the disappearance of a beautiful human.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, I think back on, all of the time that I've spent working with kids in a therapeutic setting, and how I won't even say death. I'll even go so far as to just say the loss of a relationship with someone that, someone is there and present in their life that they feel connected to. And then all of a sudden they're not there anymore. At the very beginning, when we sat down talking, you had mentioned your interest in attachment.
Yeah.
And so for me as a therapist, also just a super important concept for working with anybody. We all have our attachment, even as adults. That's still something that's at play in our interpersonal relationships. But the tremendous difficulty of this person's here and now all of a sudden they're not, and like, why? And for, I would say, a good percentage of kids that I've worked with over the years, there's a sense of, what did I do wrong? Or how did I cause this to happen, right? Because developmentally as kids, right, everything is about me. I am the cause and creator of everything in my life. And so then when something bad happens, well, I'm attributing that to myself as well. And then at times even like the death of a loved one, whether that's a grandparent or even a parent or something, that it's very common for kids to think, well, I had something to do with this. And as adults, we say, well, logically, that doesn't make sense. But then how do you try and convince or communicate that?
It's not enough to just say so.
Yeah. It isn't. So
that's part of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think.
Trying to provide a tool.
Yeah, I think, and
exactly.
it allows space for that kind of conversation around issues of loss, and whether that's through death or just through separation.
I have to say, as a Christian, I can't avoid that worldview that affects what the decisions that I made, and the loss of a relationship, a good thing that disappears, to me is a symptom of the fallen world. And that's why I chose thorns for the dark forest. And those thorns destroy the beautiful bubbles. They invade. So, that's that's an undercurrent that isn't explicitly stated, that what we're witnessing is a symptom of a fallen, sinful world.
Yeah, I know that, as both of you have kind of talked about this, that idea of like faith and spirituality and wondering, kind of searching, all of those themes are here too. But as the book shifts towards the end, there is a sense of like change and connection. Where it's like, okay, there's a loss here, but there's still that connection actually is still there. It's just different. It's changed somehow. And so I wonder, I don't know if you're looking at that from from a faith perspective, or if there's something else kind of coming in there. I don't know. Can you guys talk about that piece?
I think it would be fair to say we bring that lens personally of having a faith background, but we didn't directly, as in our wording, or I didn't, I guess, with the words directly talk about faith in the story. But I wanted there's to still be elements there that you can relate to and draw into for if you do have a faith-based background, that you can insert those pieces pretty easily, and where it still can point to the hope and point to those pieces, but then also still death is a universal element. And so I still wanted there to be, I wanted it to be a tool for anyone who needs it, and for it to be healing or helpful for any child, any family. So to still have the pieces where it's maybe not directly talking about God in it, but just having kind of elements there. And maybe it ignites questioning. In the end, it ignites Sir Robert's kind of legacy and presence ignites questioning in the other villagers. And they begin to kind of wonder as well. And I kind of have this hope as well that that translates to others. Maybe people will start questioning or just wondering. And then, so there is a hope. There is a sense of hope. But I think, we have both of those things in our world. We have sorrow and we have joy deeply. They are intertwined. And, but I didn't want it to just end with sitting in those questions. Obviously, no one wants to. And though it doesn't resolve in necessarily the way our human minds and hearts would want a story to resolve with a very easy to digest, happy ending, it does resolve with what can you do and what are the good things that have come from this. And again, even when you don't get to know the whys or what happened, or you sit with, could we have done something different? Or what if this had played out in another way?
Sure.
You can start to see the pieces of the one that you lost, even again, if it's just a relationship. What are the good things that you can take from that relationship? And hopefully you can find them. And hopefully if it was a positive relationship, you have those pieces sitting in your heart and in your mind, and you can kind of carry them with you. And you get that. You get to carry that with you and hopefully shine your light a little bit brighter. And you get to see, and sometimes it's internal like that. And sometimes I think it is external, like places where you have maybe happy memory associations with that person. And you go back to that place and it might hit you still with pain, but maybe it's also a healing place, or you see their light there, or their touches, their reaches. So that's never, I don't think that's gone even when the physical presence of someone is gone. I think there's that hope and there's that understanding that their character, their lessons, their imprint is still with you, and you get to carry that.
I love that word, imprint. Yeah, that's. Well, I mean, I think about even in my own life. I was real close with my grandfather, and one of the things that we always did as a kid, when I would go visit him, is that we would play cribbage. He taught me how to play cribbage, and he'd always beat me. He'd always win. Every once in a while, I'd get one over on him, but I can't play cribbage and not think of my grandpa Hoot. Yeah, Hoot was his nickname. So I can't, like, he is with me, like, anytime I pull out the cribbage board. And I played a ton of cribbage with my kids throughout, like, COVID and lockdown and things like that. And it's still something that we play really regularly. And so it was something that now I've kind of passed on to my kids, and something that I've enjoyed. But it's during that time allowed me to tell some stories about Grandpa Hoot, who they never met. They didn't have that opportunity to get to know him, but I get to share that with him. So that's, for me, that's where my mind went towards the end of this. Like, oh, here's that kind of tangible example of a way that somebody that I've lost has imprinted on me, and there are elements of him that I carry with me. And so then trying to communicate that with children, whether that's my own or in the therapy setting, it's helping them recall and kind of crystallize certain stories, moments, experiences of how that person that they lost has impacted them, and in some ways changed them. Like, the people in the story are changed. They're distinctly different because of their connection to Sir Robert, right? And that's so much for us to be able to move forward from loss and grief, is to try and make some sense and meaning out of it. And one way to do that is to say, well, how am I carrying this person with me? How have I been changed? Or what's the imprint that they've left on me or on my life or my experiences?
This is one of my favorite illustrations Jason did. And I feel like that kind of shows that inhale of the recovery after the loss, and the kind of, I don't know, it almost to me looks like an inhale, and you can kind of see the peace and the light, and kind of reflecting on her. That's one of my favorite illustrations that you did, Jason.
Thank you. It's a portrait of my daughter when she was much younger.
I love that, and I love the personal tie into it too.
Yeah, well,
you have a lot of personal connection now. I mean, like generational connections with the illustrations that you've done for this with your grandmother and your daughter.
I do, yeah, and with Rob, and with Haylee. You know, and that tends to happen when you're going to make something. You know, you're standing between your influences and the ones you influence. So the past informs me, and hopefully I inform the future with these things. I had a lot of thoughts when you were just talking. Isn't it satisfying to hear him get it?
Yeah.
We've been working so long on trying to communicate accurately, and so many little decisions here and there, and as it gets further on, the decisions get more and more minute, like this comma or not. But it's refreshing to have someone see it freshly and pull out of it what we intend.
Yeah, it's very encouraging.
It's working. Because I think you said maybe it's been 3 years since we started.
At least, yeah.
Yeah. So you kind of get lost in the sauce, and you don't really know how it looks anymore.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And in all of those discussions with how will it be interpreted, and will this come across exactly what you're saying. And we had talked about before, Jason and I, that this story is unique. The illustrations are unique, and I love that. And our experience in the experiential education program was unique. And we kind of worried, will this book have a home? It's a harder topic. So it's not a board book or a bright, colorful, humorous children's book that people gravitate towards. I do too. That's what I was hoping when I first wrote.
It's not a Piggy and Gerald book.
No, it's not. And I love those stories. And I was hoping to make one. And
maybe next time.
Maybe the next one will have a little bit of a lighter story. But and I think we both can bring our own intensities to our art as well, or to our craft. So there was a lot of concern with, is it too heavy? Will it be, how will this translate? And will it be meaningful? So it is really refreshing.
Yeah, no, this in my mind, this is a meaningful book, and it needs to be a book on the shelf, in the home, in the counseling office, at the hospital. There are so many places where this book will have a home, needs to have a home. And you're right, it isn't one that, maybe like, oh, it's Tuesday night and we're going to read stories before bed, and, we pull this one out. It could be. I could see that for kids that maybe have had that experience and need that reminder, that kind of comfort to be able to just go back to that space of, I'm feeling heavy or sad with this. And this is kind of an outlet or connection for that. So it definitely could be one that's read, with some frequency for some kids. But I think strategically, there's a really important place for this book when you are caring for a kid and you know that they have to figure out and navigate loss and this idea of mental health. And even if it's as an introduction to it, I think this is a great place to start some of those conversations.
I have a thought.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I've heard it said that a great artwork needs to be about what it is to be a human, the human experience or the human condition. And I think that's what this is about. It's not entertainment. It's not candy. So you don't go to this book for a good time. But you do go to this book, I think, to share in humanity, to see that others feel this.
I see this being right next to some of my Max Lucado books that I have. I mean, like I've used those in therapy with kids for forever. And there's a new series, and I'm gonna forget the author's name right now, but it's what do you do with a problem?
Yes.
And what do you do with an idea?
Yes. And what do you do with a chance?
And what do you do with a chance?
Yes.
Yep. Do you remember the author?
It starts with a K, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Kobe.
Yamada?
Yeah.
Kobe. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. We got it. In these books, I'll link in the show notes because I think they're all in that theme. But there's a beauty to these books, and they aren't, again, ones that you're just reading to pass time. They're more intentional. You're reading them with purpose, and I think this is a book right on the shelf next to those.
Can I tell you something about those? Those books are on my shelf at home.
Yeah.
I have my school books that I read to my kids all the time. And then I have my ones that sit on my shelf at home that are very precious. And I'll bring them in and share them, but I'm not going to keep them in the classroom.
Yeah.
And those books are on my bookshelf at home. And I still read them as an adult and draw so much meaning out of them. And those are the books that that was what guided me with this style. It's like, okay, he did it.
And I didn't know that.
He did.
You
didn't. Never mentioned that. Yeah. So I looked at his illustrations and his style and the messages that you could pull as an adult from those books. And that was part of what influenced the story, actually. So funny that you brought that up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool. So let's talk a little bit about timing. When are people going to be able to see this book, and what needs to happen, I guess, before that day?
Great question. Hoping for a beginning of October release, end of September, beginning of October book release. And we are definitely in the thick of navigating what the launch will look like, what the release will look like. This book is being published and printed with Wise Ink Publishing, Creative Publishing in Minneapolis.
Okay.
So they are part of our team and have been wonderful in helping us move forward with this project.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure you're having to
facilitating
learn a whole new set of processes with publishing a book that you didn't know you needed to know.
It's been very experiential.
Yes. And I want to ask you, I think there's an influence there that you and I think I have treated this project influenced by experiential education. There's a restraint. We resist saying some things. We resist giving answers.
Yeah.
I think to try to draw out something.
Your own interpretation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To try to prompt the reader.
The reflection piece. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I think whether or not I thought about that the whole time, that I think that piece is there. You've used our background in experiential education. It's a lot on questioning and drawing out reflection and kind of your own conclusions and the process. It's thickened process and processing. And we talk a lot about, or we did in our courses, using art, using writing as a way of reflecting and processing the experiences you have. And
that's how it started. You were reflecting.
It was a reflection, and you're right. And
based on an experience.
Based on an experience, exactly.
Yep.
And it just kind of kept growing, and that's part of the cycle. Then what do you do next with that? And Jason has used that with me with different. What do we want to do next? Where I would, even in that context, where I'd want an answer. You tell me.
I resist. I won't give you answers.
Tell me how I should word this, and tell me if that's the right approach for this.
I try to lead you to leads you to your own answer.
Yes, and he'll come back with more questions.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is part of this story. And I'm glad you brought that up. I feel like
there's a stance. Yeah. This book has a stance that it won't just tell you, here's what happened, here's what you should do.
Yeah.
It just presents, this is true.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's a good point.
Yeah, I can appreciate that experiential learning cycle. It's, as an educator, absolutely something that I try and build into my courses as I educate future counselors, because they need to have time to sit with their own experiences and create some new ideas out of that and go test them out. Yes. Right. So that's, I hear that cycle happening, over and over on itself as you guys have gotten to this point of having a finished product that it's ready to be shown to the world.
Right. And to circle back, that's exactly. So it is very new. I think it's constantly between us and our team at Wise Inc. Discussion, reflection, changes, move forward. Discussion, reflection, changes, next step. And so the book itself is ready to go to print. It's sitting there, it's ready. We are excited. It's in that process. So it kind of feels like the final stage in that, leading up to the release. And now
which is crazy.
It is. It's been a while.
It's been a while, but talk to yourself 3 years ago.
Pacing back and forth, a nervous wreck in your studio with this pitch.
Completely unsure. Is this a thing? Is it anything?
This idea.
Yeah.
It might be nothing. Could be something. Probably will be nothing. That's where we started.
But you determined that it won't be nothing. You decided that this has to exist somehow.
Yeah.
I'm proud of you. You've been very brave about something that intimidates you. But it's like you needed to do it more than you were afraid of it.
Well, I'm also going to bring this back to you, back in that first studio session with the fears possibly speaking louder than the idea at that moment in time. Jason said, I don't know, I think I told you, I reminded you of this, but he said, if this story was placed in your hands, be a good steward of the Lord and deliver it. And that has meant so much. And I've carried that to, throughout this whole process. Anytime the fear starts to get loud again, and that, I've never done this before, so I can't do this. Those words, it's time to deliver it. And how fortunate that I get to be the one to help deliver this story. So that has to be stronger. That's that pull. That has to be stronger than anything else to deliver this story. So
because you have to acknowledge the fear.
Yeah.
You've said you don't have a place doing this. You're not an author. You feel like you don't publish books, but here you are.
Yeah.
With a book.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Thank you.
I love the gratitude. I do. I'm all about that. And so just hearing you guys share that appreciation for one another and how you've impacted one another through this process in such a positive way to bring this. I'm grateful that I get to be a part of, sharing this with people too. So that's Jason, thank you for prompting this discussion, and
Sure.
Haylee for your bravery in coming in and doing this. It's just been a fantastic discussion with you guys. I've appreciated the insights and, again, just creating some meaning around this really important project that you guys have just poured yourselves into and in very personal ways, both of you. So it's a treasure, and I'm so excited for both of you.
Thank you, Ben.
Thank you. It's been a joy to get to be here and have this conversation. This is the first real conversation we've had outside of
outside of planning.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
well, get ready
special.
because you're going to have lots more, I think, and there'll be plenty of opportunities to share a lot of what we talked about today, and even more. So it's just fantastic. So, Jason, thanks. It's been great having you in the studio. Haylee, it's been awesome visiting with you and getting to know both of you through this process. Again, I'll have links in the show notes as things are available.
Yeah.
And
we'll provide more with the launch. If you don't
absolutely. Mind. Absolutely. So that people can, hopefully attend and see some of these things in person and be ready to purchase the book when it's available.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks. A big thank you to Haylee and Jason for joining the WellMind community, and thank you for spending your time with me today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please check out previous episodes and subscribe through your podcast app so that you automatically get the latest episode. Also, consider taking a moment to review the show if you found our discussion meaningful to you. Word of mouth is great too. Let people know about the WellMind podcast and spread the word. Please check out the links in the show notes for more information on the upcoming book, Stars in the Sky. Many thanks to the staff here in the Bethany Lutheran College podcast studio. Seth and Greg are tremendous in providing technical support and editing for the podcast. Special thanks, as always, to Lauren McMacken for designing the logo and the cover art. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, be well.